it, but we're going to move on now to talk about politics at the top of this hour, because a concerning new poll is in, which is basically saying that Sir Keir Starmer's popularity has taken a bit of a drubbing. He's down -7 points in his personal popularity poll, and the direction of travel, the Ipsos Mori poll, shows that only 22% of Brits are happy with the direction of travel of the country, versus 52% who say that they are unhappy. Now, before the general election, many of us asked, was there going to be a honeymoon period for the Labour Party? And it appears, if this data is to believe, that honeymoon period is over. Now, to discuss this, I'm now joined in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. So some stark numbers, and a lot of people were saying, give it till Christmas, things might settle down. But I'm afraid, Chris, the data, the numbers coming out for the Labour Party are looking like pretty grim reading. It's still the summer.
You mentioned a honeymoon there, Martin. Great to be on the show again with you in Westminster. It's barely a wet weekend in Bognor. Forget a fairly glamorous honeymoon for this Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Ipsos Mori poll, the 9th to the 12th of August. He's found a big drop in perception of both himself, the pollsters have found it, Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves. 52%, more than half those polled, felt the government was heading in the wrong direction. 22% in the right direction, 19% uncertain. For him personally, he's down. It was 38% favourable, 30% unfavourable, down 7 points since the election for Keir Starmer. Again, with Rachel Reeves, a slight narrowing there, 36% unfavourable, 33% favourable. So you have got this lack of any kind of real outpouring of love for our Prime Minister and his new team. Perhaps not surprisingly, only 1 in 5 people, adults, who could vote and did vote. Sorry, 1 in 5 people who could vote voted for him. Yeah. 1 in 3 of those who did vote voted for him. So quite small numbers here. And I think there's a lack of, certainly not the same as Tony Blair when he really walked on water for the first 3 years of his time in government back in 97.
And there are a very real set of challenges, that's one way of putting it, crises, you could call them, facing Sir Keir Starmer. The small boats crisis shows no signs of slowing down. Almost 5,500 now for riots since Keir Starmer was elected Prime Minister. Almost 500 on Saturday alone, Chris. And then the feeling of double standards around the winter fuel bill. We saw that was axed, a saving of $4 billion, but a $10 billion outpouring to public sector pay strikes. And it's come off the back of news over the information, nothing illegal going on. Of course, that unions have donated the thick end of £500,000 to Starmer's top team since 2019. Totally permissible, but of course it does plant the seed of doubt that is this government there to look out for its union chums and not pensioners?
That's the criticism, and it hasn't yet been answered properly. You have got these big pay rises. The polling was done before, 14% pay rise for as-left workers. Of course, it did include, or was aware of, 20% rise for junior doctors, 5.5% for public sector workers. And they have removed this winter fuel allowance. That is a lingering concern. You've seen in today's Daily Express, all 6 candidates on the Tory side are saying they'll restore that universal benefit, this winter fuel allowance, which there's a choice being made here in government between supporting people, public sector workers and others with pay rises above inflation, 2 or 3 times more than inflation in some cases, and yet removing this basic right to be keeping warm for so many pensioners is a choice they might regret.
And it's worth noting that Sir Keir Starmer hasn't appeared on social media now for 4 days. That's quite a lengthy absence by any elected parliamentarian, let alone the Prime Minister. He's getting a lot of stick, of course, when he does post because of locking horns with Elon Musk, the owner of X, formerly Twitter. So it's not just from the British electorate that this Prime Minister is getting stick. He's getting a lot of flack from people across the world for free speech.
To be fair, he's not a great tweeter, Martin. He has tweeted just recently about the A-level results day on Thursday, and after that, the anniversary of victory in Japan Day for UK Allied forces in the Second World War. Also spoke about the Middle East with other world leaders. We might see more from him about GCSEs on Thursday. He courses in Northern Ireland today. He might be elsewhere in the UK tomorrow and later in the week. So I think he's not the kind of like an Elon Musk firing off tweets at any opportunity. But he is getting a hard time on social media. He has told us in briefings we've had with his team over the past few days and weeks that he doesn't want to get engaged in a battle on Twitter.
Yeah, well, moments ago, Sir Keir Starmer was speaking to the media in Northern Ireland, where he will discuss the recent riots with the head of police service there. And here's what he had to say.
I'm in Northern Ireland here today for three purposes. Firstly, to meet the PSNI officers who've been on the front line during this disorder. Many of them have been injured. And my purpose was to say to them, thank you for what they have done. We make big asks of them. They step up and they deserve our thanks. I've also had the chance to speak to the PSNI senior leadership about the challenges that they face and the support that they need. And then third and very importantly, to speak to some of the communities most impacted about the fear that they have, the anxiety that they have about the recent disorder. The disorder is intolerable. It is incapable of justification. It's clearly racist, and it does not represent the modern, forward-looking Northern Ireland that I know that this place is. So I'm very pleased to achieve all those three things today and to work with all communities, to work with PSNI and others to ensure that we handle this situation, not just the immediate disorder, but also the longer-term work that's necessary to ensure that we have that one Northern Ireland approach that I know represents the Northern Ireland, modern Northern Ireland.
Now, Chris, a lot of people will be looking at that, and they were saying all along that Sir Keir Starmer may have read the room wrong by branding all of the protesters as racist or far right or thugs. He's had time to think on that. He's had time to reflect on that. There's been a popularity backlash today in Northern Ireland. He's saying the same thing. He's still saying these protests were clearly racist.
Well, that's strong. Clearly racist is stronger than saying far right. Towards the end, he did there talk about having one Northern Ireland, bringing communities together, and I think we're yet to see that properly in the riots we saw in England in those dozen or so towns and cities earlier this month. I mean, and the big concern there is attacking anybody concerned about immigration, saying they're clearly racist. I think he's only appending that to the rioters. But certainly there's work to be done to understand why there's concern about immigration and to recognise that isn't necessarily a far-right or racist position to take.
OK, Chris, stick with me because I'm now joined by the Head of Communications at CWU, Chris Webb. Chris, welcome to the show. So the topic of union donations is in the news again today. Of course, nothing wrong or illegal with that. It's a totally normal part of the British political landscape. And the Labour Party reports out Sir Keir Starmer's team has received £480,000 from the unions since 2019. Do you think this lends credibility or fuel to the fire, though, that at the moment this Labour Party seems hell-bent on pleasing the unions, on paying back, giving inflation-busting pay rises to union workers, and meanwhile pensioners are losing their winter fuel allowance? Is this government in it for the unions?
Nice to be on. Thanks for the invitation. I think, the first thing I want to say is that trade union donations are the most honest money in politics. So what you have is people giving 10, 20p a week, hundreds of thousands of workers, millions of workers from all over the country to have a say, to have an influence and to try and improve their lives in and out of work. Now, that money is much better, much honest and much more open than, say, a Tory party backed by a billionaire donor or any party who has a big donor who comes in and says, here's my money on the table. That's the way I want you to treat working people. I don't want you to improve terms and conditions. I don't want you to legislate so it's harder for me to sack people. I don't want any improvement to the lot of working people in this country. So trade union money is quite sad the way you introduced it there, is without doubt the most honest, the most transparent. It is there so unions can work with the Labour Party to try and improve working people's lives and things at work and in out of work for people of this country. In terms of the connection with the pensioners, two wrongs don't make a right. That connection you've made there, Labour, we believe, that should be means tested and that people, if they need that payment, should get that payment. But, the accusation after 14 years of Tory rule, where workers have been absolutely hammered, whether it be the financial crash, the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, where every single crisis, the people who have had to pay the price are those seemingly at the bottom, the frontline workers, whilst we've had CEOs getting dozens and dozens of £1 million payment. We've had shareholders getting hundreds of millions of pounds. We've had dodgy PPE contracts handed out for hundreds of millions of pounds during the pandemic. Not a single word said about any of those things. Yet when the little man or little woman gets a pay rise, you want to come on and you want to make a show of it.
No, what I'm saying, they're two different things, because one is public money and one is private money. In this instance, if union workers are getting 5.5%, NHS workers, teachers, inflation busting pay rises, that carries a cost of £10 billion. £500 million to the junior doctors, £100 million to the train drivers last week. All of this will certainly increase because more and more unions, no doubt your own, might be going up and asking for a bag of silver. So what I'm saying is, if Rachel Reeves is the financially prudent chancellor, the £22 billion, this massive black hole we inherited from the Tories, well, they're just throwing another 12, 13 billion into that black hole.
Well, you know, the way you've introduced that there, Martin, is embarrassing. A bag of silver, this is money that working class people need to put food on the table, a roof over their heads, to be able to live.
Other working class people pay
life.
it through their taxes.
Yeah, they do.
That's the point.
And you know what? There's a truth that needs to be said in this country. If the Tories and the condemned government have dismantled infrastructure, and if we truly want a better NHS, if we truly want a better transport system, a better communication system, a better postal system, then we're going to have to pay to make that better. Because quite frankly, due to deliberate mismanagement of the key infrastructure of this country, they all across all of our networks, whether it be post, telecoms, rail, NHS, energy, is in disrepair, and we are going to have to slowly rebuild that, and that is going to come at a cost. But do you know what's nice to see? It's nice to see frontline workers getting a pay rise, isn't it? Rather than frontline workers having their pay suppressed whilst millionaire CEOs get rewarded for doing absolutely nothing. I think it's actually a really positive turn of events.
Well, Chris Webb, there'll be many, many people watching this show who haven't had any form of pay rise in a while, and they were the ones bankrolling the union pay rises coming down the line. But look, I appreciate your opinion. You're a passionate fellow. Please come back on again.
Excellent. Martin, that's wrong. That's wrong. Yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong. You can't. You put that. You're introducing that terrible and embarrassing race to the bottom attitude, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Everybody deserves a pay rise. There's plenty of money.
Everybody
in this
isn't getting a pay rise, Chris. My point is, the people who are the front of the queue now, the Labour Party are in power, are the unions. That's my point. It'd be great if everyone get a pay rise, but I live in a world where I know that's not permissible because we're £2.7 trillion in national debt, Chris.
You've just made a brilliant case there. Join a union, everybody watching. Join a trade union.
All right, Chris Webb, Super Head of Comms at CWU. Thank you very much for joining us.